It's great to be here in your presence, especially talking about children in crisis. I first of all give apologies. I'm not Paula Bennett, though I do come from the West originally, but she's not able to be here, so I'm the stand-in. You always know when you're the extra in the crowd, because when you go into a place that's official, you're the guy with the hello sticker. So I don't have a hello sticker, but I do have a name badge that someone just wrote in pen. So, so you always tell, oh, he's the person that's come in who wasn't officially on the program. So I'm not officially on the program, but I'm here, I suppose, in a sense, as part of government, to talk about the things that are important, and especially about children as well. I've got a speech that's prepared that the Minister wants to ensure that I actually have some of those key messages. So what I'll do is that I'll speak from some of those, but also talk about some of my own experiences and my background, especially working in community development. Children, family and family are also dear to me. When I made my maiden speech, my first time in Parliament, so I've been a politician for 23 months, 2 weeks and 16 hours, not that I'm counting. And often people say to me, so, you know, why did you get into politics for? And I said, because my wife told me to. And that's the truth, she did. She told me that you should do that, because some people say, oh, you know, you should get involved. And I used to be sceptical about the role and the position of politics. And then one day she said to me, actually, you should give it a go. And I said, why? Because you talk too much. And I said, well, that's great. But then she said, but actually, you know, we need people there to be able to speak on behalf of our communities as well. So I see that the role of politics is no different to the roles that you play. The roles that you have in your organisations. You could be the co-master of a marae, a president of the RSA, principal of a local school, the manager of an NGO, or a kura, whatever it may be. In a sense, we all have leadership roles, and I sense that we're here today because of that. Especially when we're dealing with children in crisis in our situation in New Zealand as well. We came from South America, we were over in Argentina for 8 days. And it was quite interesting because we met with the Congreso, which is the equivalent of Parliament or government over there, and we began to look at and ask questions about their social development program. In 2001, 50% of that population of 42 million people were below the poverty line. What they can say now in 2013, that there's only 22%. Now that's still a hell of a lot of people that are in that situation. And we began to talk about some of the challenges that they face as well. And I think the thing is that they face similar challenges around children, and especially around poverty issues that they have as well. So we began to compare about some of the things that we're doing. So today I want to talk about, I suppose, the Children's Action Plan and how it's wanting to make a difference. I won't talk about the aspect of, is there a crisis? Because the reality is we know there's a crisis. We can talk about the stats about the number of children that 50 over the last 5 years, you know, have died at the hands of abuse and neglect. We can talk about the 22,000 that have been sort of come out of case managers for children, young person and family services that have clearly identified there are issues of abuse and neglect. So the issue is not whether there is a crisis, the challenge is what are we doing about this. Can I say one of the things that the Minister is really clear about, that the approach of government and governments throughout a period of time in dealing with children in crisis has been something that's nothing new. And I suppose you heard Jacinda talk yesterday as well. And 3 weeks ago, when we had the legislation around vulnerable children, what was happening for us is the fact is that we all agree that there's something that needs to be done. The Vulnerable Children's Act that actually went through its first reading had unanimous support. So 121 MPs said, we agree that it needs to go to the first reading and to hear submissions. And so I want to encourage you that the Minister wants to encourage you too to ensure that we hear from you, because the devil is actually in the detail. Everyone agrees that there's an issue to be had at hand, and we've actually got to try and solve this both in our legislation and our policy and our practice, but also to, are we actually targeting and focusing in the right ways? So the clear message is that they're now open for submissions. I'm on the select committee, which is the Social Service Select Committee, that will begin to hear those submissions. I want to encourage you to make sure that everyone and anyone that's out there puts forward a submission around the details, the things that we're trying to cover as well. So the first thing I want to say is this, is that part of the action in the Children's Action Plan is first of all, making sure that we hold our government, which is called ministries, holding them to account. So you would know that actually our chief executives have KPIs, key performance indicators, that make sure that they are actually held to account. The 5 ministries are police, education, health, justice, and Minister of Social Development. Each of those chief executives now have to work collaboratively and collectively together. And it's not just about saying, yes, we've got a policy, so we tick off a box as an output. What it's now actually saying is that you now have to have an outcome that shows how, in your practice, you are making a difference, how you're triaging and how you're meeting the needs when there is a flag that goes up and says, here's a situation where there is a risk to that child and to that whānau, how are we responding to that? And I think that's first and foremost really important. It's important for me because I remember being back, I was part of the blueprint initially. I don't know if there's anyone, can you remember the blueprint at Te Rito? Okay, one or two or three. So I was part of one of the NGO groups, community representative was, that's when Steve Mahari was the Minister of Social Development at that time. And out of the baseline review, they said we needed to, and out of the Mick Brown sort of review, one of the recommendations was the fact is that the sector was working in silos. So we needed to make sure that there was this blueprint. So I was part of an initiative and a collective that over 2 years, we put together what we called the blueprint. In other words, how can we make sure that the whole sector was working collectively and collaboratively together? So we did that, we made the presentation. But along with that, like anything, while you have the systems change that's in place and about to be implemented, we also had the incidences of the Ackland twins that came along, and of course people started saying, well, here's the blueprint, but it hasn't worked. And so in a sense, the blueprint got shelved. And we were really disappointed about that. And when I remember going into a meeting and then we challenged the minister and the ministry at that time, because they said, well, it hasn't worked well, so you haven't given it a chance. And when asked the question about why we haven't been able to implement it, and it's one simple thing was this: we didn't have people at the highest level championing the change that needed to happen. You can have everyone in the middle that says, yes, we want to make this work, but at the highest levels, both at ministry and even at your chief executive level, if they weren't able to champion that change, then it didn't mean anything. And that's the reason why the blueprint got shelved. And we're really disappointed about that. What I can see now, and I think that's important, is that for the first time, we've got both a ministerial sort of collective that are now going to be responsible, but also too, we're going to have chief executives that are going to be held responsible too. So even their KPIs, their performance indicators for their own performance will be held accountable for the fact is what are we doing to make a difference for the outcomes for vulnerable children. And so to me, I think that's an important indicator of change that's happening in our system as well. One of the things I want to acknowledge, I know that Sue Mackwell's here as well, and I think that's great now that we've got, I know that he's going to talk about having a minister for children, but I suppose a step towards that, if we do move towards that, is having a person who's directed, and I'm sure Sue's over there, and just want to acknowledge Sue and her role and her directorship there. And I think that's going to be quite significant because now we've got someone who's going to be focused around ensuring holding those ministries and those outcomes accountable too. And I think that's going to be absolutely important to this process as well. One of the other things that I think that's going to be important to the Children's Action Plan as well, and you would have seen and known that it's been in the press releases by the Minister, is around the children's teams that are currently out there. So I think I met Sue outside. Sue, are you here? Sorry, no, there's another Sue. Sue's, I think it's Susan. Susan? Is she here or she's still outside having a smoke? Okay, well, Sue, she was from Rotorua. She said she was going to throw stones at me, so she's probably still outside. But is there anyone here from Rotorua? Is it all? Okay? Yep. Kia ora. And what we're trying to do, this is a pilot, so a test pilot again. So while we've got the chief executive of that being held accountable, I think the children's team, so we've got the Ministry of Education, and other sort of organisations out there are working together, so it's police, social development, SIPs as well, and that's going to be important. There's also a team at Whangarei. Are there any sort of participants from Whangarei here at all? No? No one from Whangarei, from the farmer. So Whangarei is the other sort of test pilot that's actually happening as well. So I think that's important because while we've got policy and practice, we want to make sure that on the ground that's working as well. In fact, Sue's did say to me that it's all very well to have all the theory, but if it's not making a difference on the ground, then it actually is not going to work as well. So I think that the children's team, it's an important step for us. I know the Minister sees this as a way of the game of learning. And so the other important point that the Minister's got in here is that the Children's Action Plan is a living document. And the reason that makes it different in the three parts of the white paper is because she wants to continue to be having feedback as to, so we start off these pilots in Rotorua and Whangarei, But we want to be open to learning and saying, how do we need to change that and implement that in another way to ensure that we're actually getting effective outcomes for our children in those children's teams as well. One of the things I think that's also going to be important in those demonstration sites is ensuring that as with the different ministries, that we're also hearing the feedback from the ministries and how we need to shift and change that. The reason I say that, I remember sort of going through in education in schools have been crying out to us around the fact that their engagement with the children, young person and family services, they're big concerned that they haven't getting the feedback. So having it actively involved actually in the process of those children's teams, we think is an important step in that as well. Just another thing, I'll just keep stepping through this quite quickly, and then what I want to do, I see Bettina that I'll be open to any questions, but at the same time too, if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to ask me and I'll take them on board, because I know this is a graveyard shift. We've all had big lunches and you're probably there sort of saying, okay, then let's get interactive. So if you, anywhere along the line, you think you want to ask a question, you don't understand, you want more information, then I'm happy to be able to answer those as well. One of the things that we're also doing as well is that it's the children's workforces around screening and vetting. Now that's had a bit of an outcry from the civil liberties juries, of course, about the fact that should we be doing that? Can I just get a hands up just to say that the whole aspect of vetting and screening, how many people in the audience would disagree with that process? So everybody would agree, I imagine, that it's an important thing to do. It's interesting because last night I had a public meeting in Manuela, and I had a number of people put their hand up who disagreed with the whole process that we were taking there. I asked them, what's the reason for that? And they said it was too nanny state. They said to me that this is a public meeting in Manuela. They said that we shouldn't be getting involved, that people should be free to sort of have their own private lives private. And I simply said this, well, if you've got nothing to hide, then, what's the problem? Most of us do vetting when we go for different jobs and different roles. I was a bit concerned though that some people actually did not agree with the fact of us screening and vetting the 376 odds of 1,000 people who work in schools and hospitals and other institutions. But just to let you know, we are starting to get some feedback from people who don't agree with that process. But I suppose from the audience that are here today, there isn't an issue around that. So we're getting feedback that this is the right thing to do, and so the minister's really clear that we want to continue on that track as well. There is a continuum in the sense of those who are sort of more actively involved in certain roles that they're playing with children, and those who've got lesser degree of roles as well. So it's not going to be the, let's go in to look into every part of your life. So I'm pretty confident that, I'm sure Sue would sort of agree with me there, it's not going to be a big brother look at every single thing that you have in your life. It's purely going to be focused on the areas that you have, that you're involved in with working with children. Just a couple more things I want to cover and then open it up for questions. The child harm prevention orders. This is another one that initiative has been put out through the Children's Action Plan. There are cases where children have been abused because of dangerous individuals who got close enough, and we were seeing a number of our communities who've reacted to, I suppose, paedophiles who've come out into our community, and for all the right or wrong reasons, communities have actually tried to respond. And again, once each trying to protect themselves in this sort of instance. So I suppose the government has actually definitely taken a strong stand. So this bill introduces civil orders which can be made against those who pose a high risk of abusing or neglecting children in the future, whether or not they have been convicted in the criminal courts. These orders will be called child harm prevention orders, and these orders will apply where a person has been convicted of or found on the balance of probabilities to have committed a qualifying offence. I'll just read these bits out just so that I get the detail right. Only 3 individuals in New Zealand will be able to make an application for a child harm prevention order to be imposed. These are the Chief Executive of the Department of Corrections at the end of a criminal sentence, or the Commissioner of New Zealand Police, or Chief Executive of the Minister of Social Development, and all other cases. And I think that's an important aspect of what we're trying to do. These child harm protection laws will be taken quite seriously. And again, there are only 3 people who can impose those child harm protection laws as well. I mean, there are currently programs that are in place for rehabilitation for those who are offenders at the moment. So those will just continue as they'll be part of their protection order. So you're looking at me to say that there are, but that is the intent. I mean, it's obviously not just going to be sort of punitive. The government has focused a lot on the whole aspect of rehabilitation, and especially for those that are in this sort of situation of abuse.